going on, guys? I'm Zach.
I'm Levi.
And welcome to Blitz and Gigs, episode 15.
This is a special one, man. It's mock draft season.
It's mock draft season. It's time.
We are today a week out upon filming from the first round of the NFL draft. Very exciting. We've been doing our off-season vids where we kind of like predict where we think each team is going to go in the draft, but there have been a lot of off-season moves since then, so things have changed, team needs have shifted, and I think it'll be good to reevaluate pretty close to the draft. One interesting thing about this year's draft is that nobody has traded their first round pick yet. Mm-hmm. Even teams like the Rams that have traded out first rounds for years in advance, they're still holding on to theirs this year. So obviously that has the tendency to change on draft night, but currently things are still the same. So we're not doing any trades in this mock draft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be straight up. Kind of just diving in, seeing how we think it's going to go 1 week out. So you want to get started?
Sure thing.
All right. So I'm going to be doing all the odd numbers, and he's going to take the evens, and we'll kind of just talk about it as we go. So with pick 1, I don't think there should be any disagreement here. I'm going to go with Cam Ward to the Tennessee Titans. I think Tennessee is in dire need of a quarterback. The Will Levis thing just didn't work out, unfortunately. They've been rumored to take him all off season. He's a huge favorite to go there. It just makes sense. I don't think there's anything that's going to change that at this point.
Totally, and I mean, he was just on a Fortnite stream the other night talking about how he thinks Calvin Ridley is a top 4 receiver in the league.
And Traylon Burks.
Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard are a top 4 backfield duo in the league. It's obvious he's totally prepared to go to Tennessee.
Yeah. It's
obvious that Tennessee wants Cam Ward. I don't think there's any question about this pick. I think you could put the house on it.
100%, yeah. It's definitely the realistic outcome. I don't believe he's QB1 on either of our boards personally, but that's the way it's going to play out. That's the way it's going to play out. So
I think some of the offseason moves would favor a guy like Shedeur, given that, I mean, Tennessee tried to address their O-line, but they got some of the wrong guys. Like, we saw the worst piece of Pittsburgh's offensive line from last year get $20 million a year in Tennessee, which is just absurd.
It is.
That screams we're desperate for help in the passing game, but we don't have enough patience to see through and make sure that we have a good quarterback, we have good receiving threats, we have a good offensive line. They're trying to Band-Aid solution what they can, and then they're putting the entire house on Cam Ward. If he doesn't succeed year one, I mean, it could mean a lot, as far as Brian Callahan's career and where that goes, because truth be told, I don't think they have many other options.
Yeah, 100%. So Tennessee's not in a situation right now where I think Cam's going to get there and immediately have success. Guys like Jaden and Stroud, obviously taking their teams to a playoff berth. Year one, I don't think that's what Cam is getting himself into, but I think he'll be a franchise quarterback for years to come.
Yeah, with due process and in time. Moving on to pick 2 in the NFL draft, we have the Cleveland Browns. Once again, I feel like this is kind of obvious as long as Cam goes 1. I think Travis Hunter's going at pick 2. I feel like, they kind of have their receiver 1, borderline receiver 2 guy with Jerry Jeudy on another year on his current contract. Same thing on the defensive side of the ball. They have Ward at the corner, who's a serviceable CB1 in this league. But you don't really have depth at either of those positions. You don't have a 1B or a 2A kind of guy.
Right.
And Travis Hunter is projected to be that guy. He might not be a receiver 1. He's 6 feet tall, 190 pounds. He's my build with a 4.4.
Yeah.
But that said, is he capable of popping off for 800 yards receiving this year and allowing less than 100 passer rating? More than likely, yeah. We kind of expect that just based off his athleticism and ball skills alone.
100%. And you really hit the nail on the head there as far as he may never be a bona fide wide receiver 1 or a bona fide cornerback 1 in this league. But the fact that you can get a guy who's very talented, very good at both, and you're only really going to have to pay him wide receiver money, not corner and wide receiver money, for him to give you both sides of the ball there. It's a great bang for your buck pick. All offseason long, the discourse has been, go get Abdul Carter, especially when Myles Garrett was rumored to be on his way out. And I think that would just be a mistake. There's no reason to pair a blue chip edge rusher with another blue chip edge rusher. You just sign Myles to $1 billion, let him play out his deal, let him be extremely productive. don't crowd the room.
Once again, I mean, I feel like they have enough quarterback play in the room to suggest that they're not drafting a guy this year. I don't think there's enough talent for them to, go chase a chip this year. Mm-hmm. But I think Myles Garrett signed on with the idea that there's going to be a franchise quarterback in the building in the next few years. I think that's probably going to be next year. Bringing in Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, it indicates that you're not really interested in starting Deshaun Watson, but you're paying him $70 million this year. There's just no reason for them to take a quarterback either. So no Carter, no quarterback. Travis Hunter's the obvious pick to me.
100%. And if you're going to trade for a guy like Deshaun and then guarantee his entire contract, which we won't get into the specifics of that, but you kind of have to just let it ride out at least another year before you throw a quarterback into that mess of a roster right now. Mm-hmm. Don't draft a guy this year and get him killed while still paying Deshaun all that money. So 100% I think it's the right pick.
For sure.
Moving on to pick 3 here. Very, very polarizing spot for New York to be in. There's been a ton of talks as far as, do they trade down? Do they go Hunter if he's there? Carter? Do they take Shador? Do they take Jackson Dart? There's a million different directions New York's been rumored to go, but I think the most logical answer at this point is to take Abdul Carter and wait another year to get a quarterback. I think Arch Manning would be a great fit in New York next year, especially if Brian Daboll has a good enough season to retain his job. Abdul Carter is a monster. I mean, he's the Myles Garrett, the Micah Parsons, the Bosa of this class. He's going to be extremely productive. The Giants already had a pretty young and talented defense. They signed Javon Holland. They still have a young Kayvon Thibodeau. I like where that defense is heading. I think if they can just get serviceable quarterback play from one of the 2 guys they signed this offseason, they'll be in a really solid spot to be at least competitive next year.
Yeah, for sure. I saw a post today basically comparing them to the 2024 Steelers in that if you draft Abdul Carter, you're talking Thibodeau, Brian Burns, Paulson Adebo as well. Mm-hmm. Very loaded defense and a decent offensive mind in the building. Art Smith and Brian Daboll.
Right.
Not just the fact that they have Russell Wilson, but yeah, you pair Russell Wilson with an explosive outside receiver, Malik Neighbors and George Pickens, and yeah, this team could win 9 games. Obviously, it's in a tough division in probably the tougher of the 2 conferences right now, but a very, very elite defense with a serviceable offense. That's right where the Giants want to be going into next year when they're probably looking at taking a quarterback, as well as Daniel Jones' cap hit being greatly reduced after this year. Mm-hmm. I think they're trying to tread water, load up on defense, and next year they can go and get Arch Manning with the first overall pick or any of the countless other quarterbacks that are projected to go round 1, 2, 3 next year.
Very well said. I totally agree.
Personally, with this New England pick, I feel like Stephon Diggs and Matt Collins were not enough to elevate that wide receiver room, but I kind of feel like Robert Kraft feels like they are. I feel like they think there's enough help in that receiver room just to get Drake May more than Keyshawn Boutte and Jalen Polk.
Right.
I don't think they're going to address receiver in this draft, especially with Steph Diggs' contract being for 3 years. Matt Collins also on a long-term deal.
Right.
There's plenty of time to acquire weapons. Offensive line picks, this is once again kind of just a little early. Last year, I believe the first offensive line was Joe Alt at pick 7.
5 or 7, yeah.
Typically, those trench guys are going to go mid to late round. Ashton Jeanty also not touted to be a top 5 pick. Mm-hmm. It's just very rare that you see a running back go that early. So I don't love this position for New England either. I could also see them trading down. Mm-hmm. But personally, it's Patriots culture, man. I think they're going O-line. I'm going to take Will Campbell.
I love that pick. I think you really nailed it on the head as far as, they're not going to go get a skill position guy, whether it be T-Mac, Jeanty, or any of the other receivers in this class, because Robert Kraft thinks, yeah, we did enough. We spent enough of my money. We patched the ship up just enough for it to be serviceable for Drake May to be productive. So I love the pick there. I think Will Campbell as a prospect is by far and away the best alignment in this class. I don't care what the reach is, the arm length, the hand size, whatever his issue is on the measurables. Look at the film, man. He dominated SEC talent all year, did it last year. No brainer to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there were a lot of projections that had Will Campbell falling to Chicago at pick 10. Chicago has great exterior offensive line talent, you know, at the tackle position. So the interior is where they're going to need him. Well, Campbell's kind of expected to play wherever the heck he wants to on any offensive line. Like Joe Alt last year, he was a shoo-in for tackle for the Chargers because they needed to start somewhere. And obviously your blind side is the most important position to protect for a quarterback. This Patriots O-line is not quite that bad. Obviously, it needs a lot of help. But I think Will Campbell has the IQ to play pretty much anywhere on the offensive line. I think this would be a solid pick. It'd set up Drake May for more success than he had last year.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, he really could play it wherever he wants on the O-line, but if the reach is going to give him trouble at the next level, that's when you're going to see him probably start to move into guard. Is that what New England's drafting him at 4 to be? Is a left or right guard? I don't know. Could he still be an all-pro, Pro Bowl level guy for a decade at guard? Probably. So I love the pick. I agree with you.
For sure.
Moving on to pick 5, we've got Jacksonville. Also a team that could use a good amount of help everywhere. I think based on who's available here, they took a receiver in the first round last year. I think we got Mason Graham out of Michigan. I think the defense could use some more talent on it. I know they brought in an offensive guy to coach up the team, but we really didn't see Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas have a chance to form a connection last year, and Brian Thomas was still a top 10 receiver. So give him a full year together with, Mr. Duval himself. Let him fix the offense up. Maybe go get a running back in the second or third, and see what the offense can be without adding anything. So I like a defensive pick there. I think Mason Graham's a really solid prospect. He's not Abdul Carter, obviously, but he comes from a winning culture. Was very productive at Michigan. I think it's a great pick.
For sure, I agree. When we're talking about this Jacksonville offense, I think it really just comes down to what you think of Trevor Lawrence. Travis Etienne, huge underperformance last year, but no one can question his abilities as a running back when he's fully healthy, fully motivated, and behind a good offensive line. Tank Bigsby, also very capable RB2.
Right.
Brian Thomas Jr., elite receiver 1 in year 1, the best of last year's class, at least for his year 1 performance. And then we're talking Evan Ingram at tight end. Like, there's a lot of talent in the skill positions. I wouldn't love G&T to Jacksonville. I feel like it would just kind of be a waste of a pick. You could get a day 2 or day 3 guy that could really add a lot to that backfield. Same thing with receiver. There are some decent X receivers that are supposed to fall in round 2 or 3. So when you're talking about defensive picks, Mason Graham should absolutely be one of the first ones off the board. Abdul Carter is a generational pass rusher. He's gone. Let's go get the next best thing. Graham is a great run stopper, great in the pass defense as well. Just elite trench help for a team that has kind of overspent on the skill positions.
100%.
Moving on to Las Vegas, earlier when we were doing our off-season videos, we kind of didn't expect him to fall this low, but I think it's kind of been the dream situation is Shedeur to the Raiders.
I love that.
Tom Brady's in the building. Tom Brady loves Shedeur Sanders. He's been personally involved in his development since high school. Personal relationship with Deion Sanders as well. Tom Brady is an owner and a broadcaster, which kind of means that he can't be invested in Shedeur unless he plays for the Raiders from this point forward. So, given that he's also said that he's a fan of quarterbacks sitting for a year, Geno Smith is in the building, but for how long? 2 years of his deal are guaranteed, but you could have him sit starting next year. Shedeur comes in. He's got Jacoby Myers, who just had a breakout year. Acquires some talent in the backfield in the mid to late rounds of this year's draft. You also have Brock Bowers, the best tight end prospect we've seen in forever at tight end. A decent O-line and a very solid defense with Max Crosby getting extended this offseason. Pete Carroll's a winning coach. I think Shedeur Sanders is a winning quarterback. I love this pick for now and for the future.
Yeah, man, I love everything you said. Me and you have been calling Shedeur to Vegas since September or October last year. We've been manifesting this for a while, so I think it would be great for Vegas. It'd be great for Shedeur. The one pushback I'd say is for those who are skeptical on Shedeur, whether it be the off the field stuff or he's just not a good enough athlete to compete at the next level. If that's the position you stand with on him, do you regret not taking a guy like G&T this year and doing the same thing that New York did and waiting one more year for one of the top guys next year. Because there's a very good chance the second or third best guy next year is just as good as Shedeur. You never know.
Right. I mean, when we're talking about Shedeur, in my eyes, I kind of see him as one of the better prospects since that Dream 2020 class. I mean, I'd put him up there with like the CJ Strouds, the Jaden Daniels in terms of his potential to me.
Agree.
But will we see that come to fruition? I think if you have him sit for a year, maybe. You know, we've seen CJ hit a brick wall because there's just no protection. There's nobody to build talent around until it's his team to take over. Same thing with Jaden Daniels. He hasn't hit that brick wall yet, but I mean, skeptics of Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, they kind of expect the athleticism to not last them when they just don't have the help that they need. Vegas, under the new head coach, Pete Carroll, and under the new minority ownership of Tom Brady, they have the ability to build very smart. This is a very new team, new culture, and I think they're going to do right by Shedeur if he's there. I think it's been Tom Brady's dream for Shedeur to fall to pick 6, and you could argue that maybe he's kind of the one pulling the strings, putting out these articles, trying to get him to fall that low.
I love it, man. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Moving on to pick 7, the New York Jets. Once again, a team that could kind of use everything.
They lost a lot of defensive talent this year. I think that's important to point out. Obviously, one of the top defenses last year. Still very capable under Aaron Glenn's leadership, but I think Robert Saleh was a very competent defensive mind. So it's kind of like, you know, changing of the guard. I wouldn't really expect it to get better just on coaching alone.
Yeah. It's tricky, man, because it had Shedeur fallen, I'd love for him to sit a year behind Justin Fields as well here. But given the circumstances, I think Justin Fields will have some success with the talent given to him. This may be early for the positional value, but I think Tyler Warren out of Penn State, huge positional need for them. They've had little to no tight end play for the last couple years now. Tyler Warren's a fantastic prospect out of Penn State. He was very productive with Drew Aller, who's had his moments, but he's pretty spotty. So I think he'll be very productive day one. Maybe not quite a Brock Bowers level season, but certainly be a difference maker for New York.
More than serviceable is what I'd say. And when you also look at this New York run game that kind of underperformed, Breece Hall going for back-to-back, like just 1,000-yard seasons and not much more. He's very helpful in the red zone as well. But I think it's time that we kind of see him up his value as a yardage guy, and having a blocking tight end like Tyler Warren, who's also elite as a passing threat, is going to be a great help. If you think he's half as good as Cole Kmet or twice as good, either way, Justin Fields performed with Cole Kmet and a serviceable receiver one in DJ Moore, and now in Garrett Wilson. I feel like you could give Fields the ability to make himself the franchise quarterback for the New York Jets if you get him the right help like Tyler Warren. I love that pick.
100%.
Moving on to Carolina. This is a team that we're big fans of, I believe. We love Bryce Young. I like Dave Canales. I think he's definitely a kind of a quarterback kickstarter. This offensive line was overhauled last year, and I feel like they kind of have found their stride. I don't think you need help there. I don't think you need help in the backfield when you got Chuba Hubbard as well as Jonathan Brooks maybe coming back from injury sometime this year. Rico Dowdle now in the mix. On defense, there's a lot to address, but truth be told, play to your strengths, man. You're trying to win 8 games here. You're trying to be competitive in the worst division in football, or one of the worst divisions. I think you got to go offense. I think you got to get Bryce Young a target. And I think whether or not he's the best receiver in this class, T-Mac is going first.
Yeah, that's a beautiful pick, man. Once we saw Bryce kind of snap out of the funk he was in to start off his career, and he started to show the flashes, he really took that next step. I think it became clear you got to give him at least one more year, and giving him a weapon, like you said, is the only way to really see if he was set up for failure, or does he stand a chance in this league if we can get him just a little bit more help. So I love the pick there. As of recently, T-Mac as a prospect, his stock has plummeted some. Does that concern you at all?
A little bit, but mostly for the sake of, I don't want a Mecca or Matt Golden to fall out of reach for the Cowboys. I'd rather choose between those two than one of those in T-Mac. I do expect him to be, one of those top 3 guys in this year's draft. Mm-hmm. But, as we've seen these other guys absolutely wow in the combine, and Emeka being a national champion now, it's kind of like, what has T-Mac done to put him above and beyond those guys? Was it just somebody that we circled at the beginning of the college season and we just wrote it out? And I feel like that's kind of the story, the tale of the tape with T-Mac. I don't think there was anything that made him clearly the receiver 1 in this draft. I just think, he's been around. He's been kind of that guy for Arizona for 2 or 3 years now. And I don't think people really want to let him lose that number 1 slot.
Yeah, I will say T-Mac's not the most athletic, skill position player on the board by any means. He had some crazy statistic, like 50% of his yards came in like 3 games against some of the worst teams in college. Mm-hmm. So a little bit of a stat inflation there could be something to worry about. However, he gave Travis Hunter fits when they played Colorado, and Travis Hunter is, supposed to be an elite DB, or at least has the potential to be. So with that in mind, I love the pick there for you. I think giving Bryce another weapon should be promising.
Right, especially considering the archetypes. I mean, you got Xavier Legette, who's kind of more your speedster guy in Carolina, and T-Mac should be able to kind of contrast well and give Bryce a little bit more versatility in his routes.
Right. So moving on here, we got the New Orleans Saints at pick 9, and me and you had them going defense early on. I think initially, had they not signed Chase Young or re-signed Chase Young, I would have still leaned defense. They found the cap to do so. So I think best player available, Alvin Kamara is getting old. I think we take Ashton Jeanty, give Kellen Moore a weapon, give him somebody who... Just give him a cheat code, man. Like, whatever the quarterback situation plays out to be, whether Chris Olave plays football again, you got Ashton Jeanty in your backfield. Even if teams stack the box, he's still going to get 3 yards a carry. Like, I don't think you can go wrong with Ashton Jeanty. In my opinion, he probably should have gone sooner. He's that good of a prospect. I know he's undersized, but same story as Will Campbell. Look at the film. He produced against good competition, great competition even, and whatever his deficiencies might be, they don't show up on film.
Absolutely. And I mean, yeah, like you said, Alvin Kamara is getting old. And since Drew Brees retired, since that era of great quarterback play in New Orleans ended, their entire offensive identity to me has been built around Alvin Kamara. When he's unhealthy, they don't work. When he's healthy, they're one of the best offenses in football. The first 2 weeks of last year were great evidence of that when him and Derek Carr shared the field. And Derek Carr, who is not a top 10 quarterback in this league.
By any means.
Very much looks like a top 10 quarterback when he has Kamara in the backfield going for 4.5 yards per carry.
Yes.
This guy has never had a 1,000-yard rushing season. Alvin Kamara has never rushed for 1,000 yards. It's always been all-purpose yards or just touchdowns that have made him that elite guy. Jeanty is not a receiving back. He's not a direct transplant, but like, this is a decent New Orleans offensive line. Jeanty could elevate it to the next level, add more versatility, create more options, and really free up that offense entirely because he is an elite runner, and they have not had that elite rusher in the backfield in a long time.
1,000%. And I don't even think it's that Jeanty isn't a receiving back per se. He just didn't get the opportunities to because he was always getting handed the ball. Why take the chance of snapping it and something going wrong when you're trying to get the ball out to him in space when you can just hand it right to him? So I think Boise State did that intentionally and didn't want to give him much touches receiving, but I think he can do it all. I think it's a great pick.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. Moving on to Chicago, this is a team that 100% is in the market for Ashton Jeanty, but they might just be too late. So Ryan Poles has been known to work his magic and get the most out of his trade value. There's a chance that I could see them moving up for Jeanty, truth be told, on draft night or a little before. Given that he's not there, the only real gap I see on their entire roster is still at running back. I mean, you have DeAndre Swift, who is a better receiving back than people give him credit for, but he's just not quite big enough to get those yards at the line. And the next best back on the board is absolutely Omarion Hampton. He's touted to go in the mid, sometimes late first round, but I think he's probably going to go to Chicago if they don't have better options, even if it means trading down.
Interesting.
I feel like he's just an absolutely outstanding prospect, and maybe he's not generational like Jeanty, but we see these guys every year. You have your Bijan Robinsons, your Travis Etienne's. Last year was really like the anomaly when we didn't have a first round back. And even then, we had Bucky Irving in the 5th, who absolutely could have been taken in the first round if people knew what he was.
Right.
So I love Hampton to the Bears. I feel like they're just in desperate need of some elevation to the run game. They have the offensive line now. They have the quarterback. They have the receivers. They have the tight end. They have the defense. And they have the coaching. So there's really only one position missing, and I think it's Hampton.
Yeah, I think you nailed that one. They'd really be upset if Jeanty doesn't fall to him at 10. I will say the defensive line to me is still a question. I know they made some moves this offseason to try and plug some guys in and fix that. They did a very, very solid job at trying to fix the O-line, which has been a need for them for forever. Is there any chance that maybe they would have gone D-line? Do you think that that's something maybe Ben Johnson will regret, or do you think...
I feel like this is a deeper class for defensive line, so I feel like there is definitely they have the option to go there in the first, but that said, I mean, you take Jack Sawyer from Ohio State in round 2 or 3, I think you're looking pretty good at edge, and I mean, there are late round to early second round guys on the defensive interior as well, whereas I feel like this running back class, although there are great day 2, day 3 guys, they're just day 2, day 3 guys.
Right.
In comparison to other day 2, day 3 guys, like they look incredible. But the truth is, if you miss out on one of these top 2 guys, like I don't really think it's worth spending that first round. You have the ability to take somebody that Dallas would take, that I'm going to say Cincy would take, Denver would take. Denver's probably going to take at 20 if he's there. You have the ability to take him now, and you could even trade back a few spots to do it. I feel like Chicago has every reason to be invested in Hampton. If you pair him up with DeAndre Swift, it's like you could have a top 5 offense and a top 15 defense with exactly how your roster is.
It's very well said. I agree. Moving on here to pick 11. San Francisco's really interesting because they got rid of all of their talent for cap purposes. As much as it pains me to say it, I would love for him to fall 2 more spots, but Will Johnson just makes all the sense in the world. He's by far and away the best corner in this class. Similarly to Mason Graham, he's from a winning culture. He was very productive on his respective team. He has the same deficiency, if you would, as Will Campbell, where doesn't have the longest arms in the world. Not ideal for a corner. You prefer for your secondary guys to be a little lengthier. Doesn't matter. Look at the tape. He's, he's getting pick sixes in bowl games, and he's being extremely productive. I don't know. There's a lot of defensive players you could go with here at 11, but value-wise, I think Will Johnson makes the most sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, a lot of these top-round guys, these teams that are just consistently, scraping at the bottom of the barrel each year, they have to build from the inside out, because you just have to have some kind of protection for your quarterback, and you have to have some kind of run stop so that you can eventually give priority to your outside guys, your receivers, your corners. San Francisco has pretty traditionally been great at drafting on the interior and signing on the interior. Mm-hmm. And this is really the first time we've seen them sell and reap the benefits of having drafted so well for so long. So, I mean, if they're looking at giving Brock Purdy a big fat extension, mm-hmm. or if they're not, their interior needs to look good. It mostly does, and they have the opportunity to make it better in this draft. But if you're not getting Will Campbell, I understand just not really spending that first round. That pick 11 is a premium pick. You don't want to spend it on the second best O-lineman in this class. You can go and get the best corner. This is a team that can afford to build from the outside in.
100%.
Totally. So moving on to Dallas, I'm pretty confident about the position that I see them going with, assuming that Ashton Jeanty just doesn't fall to pick 12. I would really love to see a move at corner personally, but to me that looks like more of a 1 year, almost like trading for Jalen Ramsey type deal.
Yeah.
We're just waiting for Deron Bland and Trayvon Diggs to share the field at the same time. And there are developmental guys in the pipeline with Kyer Alam from the Bills and Kalen Carson from last year's 5th round. I feel like there's talent there. You're just looking for a guy to patch that. And I don't think you want to find that in the draft. We're not looking for more development at corner. What we are looking for is a receiver too. The pick to me, based on discourse in Dallas, is going to be Matt Golden out of Texas. Maybe not my favorite pick here, but I would really expect that at pick 12. He just, for one, obviously a Texas kid. A lot of Dallas players are showing love to Paige Beckers right now. Just got drafted to the Houston WNBA team. I don't know the name of the team. But there's a lot of Texas love in Dallas, and I feel like that makes Golden kind of a perfect fit in addition to his archetype just pairing well with CeeDee Lamb. Lamb covers the whole field. You're kind of looking for somebody who can take some of that load off of his plate.
Yeah, I love going wide receiver there for Dallas as well. I think it's just a matter of which ones are on the board when it gets to pick 12. And based on how the mock draft is playing out so far, I think that's the right move. Matthew Golden has the potential to be, what's his comparison? Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra? Like, that's the kind of...
Very athletic.
The kind of ceiling he has.
Yeah.
Had one of the best 40-yard dashes in the combine this year. I love the pick.
Yeah, if you get your downfield guy, CD can, really thrive in that slot. That's what he did for his first few years when you had Cooper playing the X. Mm-hmm. So if you find, your downfield look guy, he can open up the field a lot for a guy like CD to thrive.
Moving on here to pick 13. My Miami Dolphins are on the clock. So this one's interesting because they would have loved to have Will Johnson. There's not a corner that makes sense for them to take at this point at pick 13. They have no safety play, and the O-line is a constant, patch it up and hope it can hang next year kind of thing. And if we're talking about being realistic, I don't think Chris Greer drafts another lineman in the first round. If anything, he'll wait till the second or third and get a developmental guy like he did last year in Patrick Paul. So with pick 13, I have the Dolphins taking Malachi Starks out of Georgia. Fantastic prospect. Easily going to be a top 3 or 4 defender from this class the second he hits the field. Once again, comes from a winning culture in Georgia. I love guys that come from a winning culture because Miami desperately needs some of that. And a physical guy, he'll take Javon Holland's spot pretty much seamlessly. So,
for sure. I love this pick for you. I know prior to Ron Armstead's retirement, you were 100% invested in Starks if he's there, and we just didn't really think he'd fall. New Orleans seemed like a shoe-in to draft Starks until they kind of addressed their safety room already. So I love Starks for Miami. I think he's going to be elite. He's elite in the passing game and in the running game defensively, and I think that's exactly what you need. The Miami defense just has not looked elite in a couple years, since even maybe before that 2023 11-6 year when everything seemed bright in Miami. I feel like you have the ability to kind of reset the culture. You've had a lot of retirements, probably trading Jalen Ramsey, maybe having to say goodbye to Tyreek Hill as well. Get a young guy in the building. He's going to really set the tone on defense.
Yeah, it's I'm always preaching when you draft a young guy and he's talented, hold on to him, keep him in the building. They didn't do that with Christian Wilkins, Javon Holland, etc. So, yeah, I think it's really tempting to go O-line here, especially with the Teron Armstead retirement, like you mentioned. But at this point, PFF having Miami ranked as like the 3rd or 4th best defense in the league last year is just a lie. Like, if you watch the film, they were not a good defense at all, and they got pushed around. So, Javon Holland doesn't like tackling people, and Malachi Starks does. So, bringing some physicality into there, I think, will make a huge difference.
For sure. Moving on to Indy, is a team I did a lot of homework on. Pretty desperate for a tight end for the sake of elevating Taylor's game to what it used to be and trying to make Anthony Richardson look competent.
Yep.
Not an elite receiving group, but a decent one with Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, if he's still there.
Adonai Mitchell from last year.
Adonai Mitchell, Michael Pittman Jr. there's too much developmental talent there for them to justify spending a first on a receiver again, to me.
I agree.
Decent O-line, really solid defense at multiple levels of the game. I believe they brought in Javarius Ward this offseason. Already a solid D-line, already a solid linebacking core. At this point, it's just like you can't keep making excuses for Anthony Richardson. I don't necessarily like throwing another pick at trying to make him work. I just don't think it's necessary. There's way too much talent in this building. You could probably get a day 2 pick at quarterback that can make that offense look better. So I like a defensive pick. I like trying to replenish, some of your older talent on defense. And I'm going to go with the pick I had in the offseason video. I mean, I think Jahad Campbell is an elite linebacker in the passing and running game, like we said, even as a pass rusher. And this is a team much like the Steelers last year, like we might think the Giants are going to be this year. Your defense could carry you to 9-8. It's not unrealistic, especially in the AFC South where 9 games is all it takes to win the division.
I mean, they almost did last year.
Anthony Richardson needs to throw 1 touchdown a game for that good of a defense to win the division.
100%, man. Yeah. Polarizing player going to a polarizing team. I think, the Colts have everything in-house but a definitive answer at quarterback to be not only a playoff team, but a playoff contender. Like you said, you have all the weapons in the world. Whether they're developmental or not, you need a quarterback to get them to take the next step. And if Anthony Richardson's just not going to do it this year, put in Daniel Jones. He's not some ceiling raiser, but he'll give you checkdowns, he'll give you accurate passes, and he'll give you a rushing upside that a lot of quarterbacks don't have. So I agree.
I mean, Daniel Jones won a playoff game and never had this good of a roster.
Yes.
In his career. This coaching is pretty comparable or maybe even better than what Daniel Jones had for his career in New York. I'm not a Daniel Jones advocate, but I am saying that, like you said, he could probably manage a game or two, and he has the rushing upside, not quite to the extent that Richardson has, but he's a better passer. We've seen it. And as much as I don't think Daniel Jones is a capable quarterback, I think he's so much more capable than Richardson. I don't think you need to address that offense anymore. It's just too talented.
Right. Moving on to pick 15, the Atlanta Falcons. Another great team, man. We're kind of starting to get into the territory where it's they don't need help everywhere, and they have very talented rosters. They just kind of need a plug-and-play guy. And for Atlanta, the defense last year was honestly pretty bad. I don't know. I think given the players that are still on the board, I would love Kelvin Banks because you lost an lineman this offseason to the Bears. Bijan is great, and Michael Penix has a chance to be great. And with that being said, you have all the weapons there. Solidify the line, guarantee him a great running game and protection. And why can't this offense be top 10, top 8 if Michael Penix is at least competent? His comp in the NFL, or even going into his draft, was Tua. If he can be a game manager like Tua with those weapons and a better run game than Tua has, could totally see this team winning the division. And even if they don't go O-line here, I still have this team winning the division next year.
Totally. And I love that pick. I mean, last year, this was a team that was, I think, top 8 in offense, at least. And that was with Kirk Cousins, who for October looked like the best quarterback in the league. For November, threw 1 touchdown the entire month. So if that team can do what it did with a solid skill position group, but not the best in the league, and Kirk Cousins, imagine what happens when you get a young guy like Michael Penix in there, who's very talented, who might have been a top 3 quarterback in last year's class. I think we're pretty confident that he was. And get him some protection. There's no reason why this team couldn't go 9-8 just from the offense without any defensive help. And they still have some of the defensive pieces from last year who were solid. I mean, bringing in Matt Judon, bringing in Justin Simmons, those moves didn't make the impact that we thought they would. A lot of the expiring defensive players, they just didn't have the impact that we hoped they would. But you got 7 rounds of this draft. Spend the first one on offense, double down on your strengths, and then just absolutely load up on defense. I feel like that's a great pick. That'll really elevate this offense to where it needs to be to steal a division from Tampa.
I agree.
Moving on to Arizona. I know you're not high on Kyler, man.
I love Kyler. What are you talking about?
You love Kyler.
I love me some Kyler.
I feel like it becomes a discussion every so often between us, though. How many chances does Kyler get?
That is true.
How much help do you give him? Has he ever had adequate help? Marvin Harrison Jr., James Conner, Trey McBride, decent O-line. Not the best offensive circumstances in the league, but you're supposed to be that dual threat guy. You're supposed to be elevating your team. You have higher expectations than a Jalen Hurts, who's had most of his wins handed to him. You're supposed to be more of the Josh Allen caliber, and he's just not. That said, you're handcuffed to him. And I don't know that there's a ton of teams on this board that would trade for him right here and now. I don't think that you necessarily want to move off of him either. I think with a competent defense, he could be there. I love a defensive pick here. Their secondary seems incredibly weak. And, I mean, we already have Will Johnson off the board. I think Jahdae Barrett is an incredible corner in this year's draft. I think he's right up there with Will Johnson, and he's just touted to go below because he's not from Michigan. He's not from the national champion team 2 years ago.
Right.
So I love Barrett. I think he'd be a great pick.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I think the state of Arizona is so dependent on Kyler Murray. And if Arizona is anything near 500 by Thanksgiving of next year, something's got to be done. You got to make the move and move on from him because he has so much talent and has been too underwhelming, despite you giving him a contract, to warrant just letting him tank the franchise for another couple years. I think Kyler Murray would be serviced well with potentially another receiver at this spot. However, their defense wasn't great last year, like you said. James Conner and that O-line actually were very productive. If you lean in to the run game and you consider yourself a run-first team, I think that would be a great identity for them. Don't make Kyler Murray be a Superman. And if he gives you flashes here and there, that might be more well-suited for him. So as much as I'd love to see them go back-to-back receivers with their first-round picks in 2 years, I like the defensive pick.
I also think a lot of projections have Marvin Harrison Jr. taking a step this year. Last year, he pretty much matched his dad's stats from year one. And we obviously know what Marvin Harrison turned out to be. I don't necessarily think he's going to follow the exact same career path, but I think he has the ability, some of the intangibles there, for him to take that step this year. And I think Kyler's a good quarterback to do it with. I mean, this is a guy who's been handed a pretty washed DeAndre Hopkins, near the end of his career, Larry Fitzgerald, and he's somehow earned like a 5 or 6 year deal. He's somehow consistently been in top 10 quarterback conversations, even though his numbers have not supported it. When you watch Kyler tape, it's pretty impressive. I think you continue to let him do what he's been doing. I think you have him use his legs a little bit more. I mean, we saw Washington be a top rushing team, and Brian Robinson Jr. is not a top RB1. But I mean, we're talking, this is Jaden Daniels. He rushed for 900 yards. If you get Kyler to 700 rushing yards this year and 3,000 passing yards, I think it's a very serviceable offense. I love a defensive pick.
Yes, sir. Moving on to pick 17, just past the halfway mark here, we're at the Cincinnati Bengals, and worst defensive team in football last year, so the side of the ball we're going to be on is pretty obvious. I'm so torn on taking the guy who has the potential and the guy who will probably be lower ceiling but a higher floor. And I think Cincinnati is going to make the wrong pick because that's what they do. And they're going to go with Mike Green, edge rusher out of Marshall. Put up absurd stats. But like I said, he was with Marshall. And a little context to that, why did such a good player end up with such a lackluster team? He couldn't get on the field at Virginia, so that required him to transfer. He's still projected to be a high first-round pick because of his statistics last year, but if you can't get on the field with Virginia, what does that say about how well you can hang with competition?
I mean, typically it's the opposite way around for these elite players, right? You go from a small school that develops talent, you're the absolute, big fish in a little pond, and then you get pruned and you go to Bama, or you go to LSU, or you go to Texas, or you go to Georgia. And that's the complete opposite story. And Virginia is not even one of those powerhouse schools. No. So when you consider taking a step down from that to play with the herd, it's like, okay, well, how valid do we think your stats are? Because the truth is, you could not do that anywhere else.
Right.
If you could, you would have gotten field time.
Right. And at least with Virginia, yeah, they're not a powerhouse, but they're playing drastically better competition than Mike Green was playing at Marshall. And, this isn't meant to be a rag on what's his name? Mike Green. Just blanked on the dude's name. This isn't meant to be a rag on him session, but like, he's just such a polarizing prospect in the sense that I don't know if we've seen anything like this before, where such a great player, or supposed to be a great player on a small school, goes this high, and we really don't know what we're going to expect from him. Mm-hmm. I think for that factor, he could be the best or second best edge rusher in the class, and for that reason, I do kind of see how the Bengals would want to take him. Mm-hmm. But it does beg the question, should they have gone with a Walter Nolan or a Kenneth Grant? You know what I mean? So
yeah, for sure. I think with these smaller schools, you're really trying to write them all as boom or bust guys. And I think that's exactly what Mike Green is. I mean, I just don't think you can count on him to make a difference, but the Bengals aren't in the move of slow playing this development. Like, if they're going to trade Trey Hendrickson, trade him now, try to get a second for him, mm-hmm. Try to load up on defense with as many guys that you think might be pro ready right this second. Because a lot of the time, the guys who are guaranteed to hit in the league, they take a year, 2, 3 to get there. Your Tyler Smiths, mm-hmm. the left guard for the Cowboys, like, worst penalties in the league, and then the next year he takes a leap. You don't want that. You want Mike Green, who might be the best edge rusher in this class, might not be, might be the worst one. But you're going to take that chance because the Bengals want to be right back in that mix for the playoffs this year.
Totally.
Moving on to Seattle. Shout out Lions.
Shout out Lion.
I think this pick is obvious. They desperately need help in the O-line. Mm-hmm. They've loaded up on defense for the most part, and I think they could still use some help there, mostly in the run game. But offensively, JSN, Cooper Kupp, Noah Fant, Zach Charbonnet, and Kenneth Walker with Sam Darnold. That sounds pretty good. That sounds top 15 to me, except for the offensive line. And with that, we're going to go to, I believe, the third best offensive lineman in this class, which is going to be Armand Membu from Mizzou.
I like that.
His physicals are insane. He didn't allow a sack all year last year. I love the guy. I think he's going to be incredible in this league. And given that Seattle really has maybe like one competent league starter on that offensive line, I don't understand why they didn't address it in free agency, but they didn't. Let's get a guy who we think is capable of being a starter this year.
Yeah, I got to say, I think this may be one of the first picks that we're going to be at a disagreement, and it's not because Armand Membu isn't an elite prospect, because we're both in agreement that he is. I'm just not convinced that the weapons that they've surrounded Sam Darnold with is enough to make him replicate what he did last year in Minnesota. JSN's fantastic. I'm a huge JSN guy. Love Kenneth Walker. Yes, the O-line's bad, but I'm not convinced that they have any beyond serviceable weapons around that. I mean, Cooper Kupp, what is he at this point besides injury prone? Noah Fant is a serviceable tight end, but if that's your second best target, you're in trouble. There's still a couple good receiver prospects on here, and me personally, whether it's I like flashy plays, I'm a Dolphins fan, I like fast receivers, I may have leaned more towards receiver, but I don't hate the pick.
Yeah, and I can understand that for sure too. I feel like everything about this Seattle offseason, mm-hmm. It's all 3-year deals. It's all old vets. It's Cooper Kupp, DeMarcus Lawrence, Sam Darnold, who's not the oldest, but still, we kind of think he's coming to the end of his career. He had a little revival, but how long is that going to uphold? So with that in mind, it's like, if Darnold's not the guy, if he can't work with the weapons he has, you can pivot off of him so easily. This year is guaranteed. The other 2 years of his deal just aren't. If Cooper Kupp is not a serviceable receiver too after this year, you can move off of him so easily. And next year you draft a guy, in the receiver room. Maybe you sign a free agent quarterback or vice versa. I think there are options for them. I think they need trench help sooner rather than later, because I don't think they're sold on Sam Darnold being the franchise guy. I don't think they would have given him just 1 year guaranteed of his 3-year deal if that was the case.
I hear you. I'm so high on Sam Darnold, though. I just really wish, like, he was top 5 in MVP last year for a reason. So I just wish that they'd set him up. Not that he'd be in a better situation with the receiver, but at least the numbers would probably jump off the page a little more. But moving on here to pick 19 with Tampa, I think, really solid offense last year, subpar defense despite having Todd Bowles. I think you're going to be on the defensive side of the ball here. Walter Nolan is still on the board. Donovan Izaraku is still on the board. Kenneth Grant is still on the board. I don't think we can justify taking D-line because Vita Vea is so dominant. I think even though he's starting to get up there in age, you got to just ride it out. And I think it makes more sense at this point to go with secondary and take Nick Emanwari. Safety. They had really solid safety play a couple years back when they won that Super Bowl. And he's a freak athlete. I think getting a little younger there, getting more explosive, trying to reestablish a similar scheme, a similar mindset to what you had when you got to the Super Bowl with Brady. I like the pick. I think he'd fit well there.
I would agree. This is a team that has struggles in the offensive line, but just like we've seen with Arizona at receiver, and with other teams, Carolina at receiver too, it's just like you can't go back-to-back first-round picks just hoping that one of these guys is going to stick at that position group. Graham Barton was kind of a miss last year. I'm not going to rule out his entire career, but I am going to say you can't spend another pick on that O-line in round 1. These are not premier round 1 picks that you can trade out of and try to get more value from. You need this pick to hit. It's going to make a big difference. And on defense, I think Evan is a great pick. I think he's going to really help balance out where your talent is. You have Vita Vea. You have, my brother talks about him all the time.
We got the
He was a rookie like 2 years ago.
Tryon Shoyinka.
Somebody else, man. I don't know. I don't really pay attention when people talk about the Bucs personally, but I know that secondary needs help. I know that they need help on both sides, passing and rushing defense, and I think Emanwari is going to be a great pick to help. Just really, kind of return to that 2020 dream season for Todd Bowles that earned him the job that he has now.
Right.
All right, moving on to Denver. Denver is in desperate need of a running back, because they had Javonte Williams who rushed for 500 yards, and then Jerry frickin' Jones swooped in and took it. So,
great move.
We're going to draft a running back this year, but the top 2 guys who are probably the only round 1 running backs are already off the board. So we're going to draft a receiver, because Cortland Sutton, serviceable, not elite receiver 1. Emeka Egbuka is the best receiver left on the board. I think it'd be an absolute blockbuster home run pick for Denver. I think Bo Nix, as much as I want to believe that he's headed for a sophomore slump, would look really good throwing to Cortland Sutton and Emeka Egbuka. I think this is a great pick. Dude,
that read my mind totally. I think Emeka Egbuka is the best receiver, not only just the best receiver available, but the best receiver in the entire class. He's fantastic. I've seen comparisons for him being similar to JSN. I've seen Garrett Wilson comparisons, all the Ohio State guys. I think, like, you made a great point. Like, with the running backs being gone, there's not another one that warrants being picked at 20. Another position that would have been interesting had they gone there, and he's a guy that's getting ready to be picked as well, is Colston Loveland out of Michigan. I've seen some mock trades that maybe they go get a guy like Evan Ingram because that is a positional need for them, but
Sean Payton's also in the market for his new Taysom Hill.
Yes, 100%. So I think bottom line, going skill position here is checking the box. I think that's the right move.
Absolutely. I mean, best defense in the league, probably on its way to being a top 3 defense yet again this year. Props to Sean Payton for that.
Right.
You got to make this offense work, though. You've got to get help for Bo Nix because the truth is his athleticism alone is not going to carry him to another, 500-yard rushing, 35 passing season. He needs help. Emeka Egbuka is absolutely the dream scenario for Bo Nix this year.
I agree. Moving on to pick 21 here. The Pittsburgh Steelers are in such a hilarious spot right now because they lost the two competent quarterbacks they had in the building. Aaron Rodgers was supposed to be the next one. It's looking like at this point he's probably going to retire. We don't know. With that being said, a week out from the draft, this current stage of the Aaron Rodgers drama, I think they go quarterback here and absolutely miss on Jackson Dart. It's such a Steeler thing to do, man. Like, they're going to take the guy who's just not NFL quality. I mean, he played in the SEC, but the Lane Kiffin system isn't designed to make you NFL ready. He threw like 3 picks in the fourth quarter against Florida in a game they were up like multiple possessions. But Jackson Dart has a solid arm. He's mobile enough. There's flashes. Some people think he's better than Shador, which boggles my mind. But with the given situation, perhaps a trade down would also suffice. But with Mason Rudolph likely being your week 1 starter at this point, I think you got to go with Jackson Dart and worst case sit him a year and see what happens.
That's fair. I mean, it was like 3 years ago that they took Kenny Pickett at, I think, pick 22 or pick 21. This kind of seems like it's going to be the same situation. It's going to be a combine riser, and they're going to miss, and they're going to regret it for years. And TJ Watt's career is going to be wasted the same way Cam Hayward's career was wasted. It seems so Pittsburgh. And to be honest, it's what might usher the end of the Tomlin era. I love Mike Tomlin. I think he's a elite coach, top 5 coach in the league. But it might be time for this relationship to end. It's not good for either party.
I agree.
Moving on to the Chargers. Very good offense. I think we're very high on this offense personally. As much as I don't think Najee Harris is capable of being a top 5 back in the league, behind this offensive line, behind Justin Herbert, he just might be this year. They need a lot of weapons. I don't know that there's an elite weapon that I would take for them right here, right now, especially considering the fact they took Ladd and they hit in the second round last year. They have Mike Williams back in the building, their ex-receiver.
Do they have a tight end?
They brought in Tyler Conklin from the Jets. Not elite, but serviceable. They need a lot of defensive help. As bad as Joey Bosa was, he's gone. You're going to miss him a little bit. I had them taking an edge in our offseason vid, given who's available still. There's probably a better edge on the board, and somebody who's a bit more available in the passing game. I'm going to take Jalen Walker out of Georgia.
Interesting.
I feel like Harbaugh is not necessarily a defensive guy. He's not going to scheme up a way to get this guy utilized the way you would use a Micah Parsons. Not that Walker's a Micah Parsons type prospect, but Walker is a guy who can cover multiple areas of the field, and that's what you're looking for on defense when you have so many gaps. This is a team that overperformed last year and will probably overperform again this year. But that's going to be because of Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh and the rushing culture, and it's not going to be because of this defense. This defense needs to slow play, get it right, and I think Jalen Walker is a very solid pick with that in mind.
I hear you. I think at this stage, with who's remaining on the board and the positional needs for the Chargers, they didn't lose that playoff game because of their defense per se, at least not in my opinion. Justin Herbert threw 3 picks because nobody could get open.
4 picks.
4 picks. Even worse. I like Jalen Walker. I think him and Jahad Campbell are similarly first-round talents, but I don't know if they'll ever be the blue-chip caliber guys that'll get you a ton of all-pros. However, I disagree just because Luther Burden's still on the board. and he is a magician with the ball in his hands. And yeah, you signed Tyler Conklin, but Colston Loveland is also a really solid prospect for tight end. Either of those positions, me personally, I would have selected, but I don't hate the pick at all. I think the defense could still use some help, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, I think traditionally, hardball culture, Jim and John, it doesn't favor one side of the ball. I mean, they were both special teams guys coming up before they got head coaching positions. And with that in mind, you're thinking just overall talent, best athlete, best player available. I think that's kind of Jalen Walker at this point. We're starting to see picks that we're predicting are going to miss. We think they're going to happen, but we think they're going to miss, and that's going to be like your Jackson Darts. With that in mind, I think we're going to take the best player available. I think that's Jalen Walker.
I hear you. Pick 23, we've got the Green Bay Packers. Would it be funny if they just got another developmental receiver? I feel like that's such a Packers thing to do.
That would be very Packers of them.
It actually has their top 2 most likely people to be picked are receivers, which is crazy. But I think edge help is probably the way to go here. Their defense just didn't get much of a push. In the games that I watched, at least, they didn't, minus the Miami game, because they got plenty of push on Miami's O-line. So with that being said, I think we go edge here and take Donovan Izaraku from Boston College. Very solid prospect, coming from a smaller school, similar to Mike Green. Still very productive. You know, they could probably use help on the interior as well, depending on how you feel about Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant at this point. Those guys could have also warranted a selection here, but how do you feel?
For sure. I mean, I think it'd be between Izaraku and James Pierce Jr. We're looking at these last few edges that are really that round 1, round 2 talent. And, I mean, I think this is a solid pick. I had him going to the Chargers in our offseason video. I mean, Green Bay just needs to stop neglecting the defense. I know LaFleur is an offensive guy. I know you're pushing for that offensive culture. And, yeah, you just don't have a serviceable receiver 1 right now. That said, you can't keep throwing picks at it hoping that somebody's going to stick. Jordan Love barely stuck as a first-round pick.
Yeah.
So it's time that you address the defense. You try to bring some balance to the ball. I think Izaraku is a very solid pick.
Yeah, and the passing game was still serviceable even with the no bona fide number 1, but they still got plenty of production. I anticipate Jordan Love being the best he's ever looked next year. Maybe one of the young guys take a step up. Whether it be Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, if Christian Watson can stay healthy, we never know.
Dontavian Wicks.
Very
cool name.
They took Lucas Van Ness a couple years back from a smaller school as well, and I think that it's just such a Packers pick to take Izaraku in this spot. But
moving on to Minnesota, division rival for the Packers. There is one position that Minnesota needs desperately, and the top 2 guys are off the board, and not a lot of other guys are really expected to go day 1, day 2. It's going to be cornerback. But I think whether it's trade down or whether it's trade up for somebody better, they still need to address it with their top pick in this year's draft. Even if it would mean, hey, let's trade our first-round pick. I mean, I wouldn't trade a first for the guy, but let's go get Jalen Ramsey. Whatever it looks like, you need to address corner. With that in mind, I'm going to take the 3rd best corner in this year's draft. We're going to take Siobhan Rebel.
Love that, dude.
I think it's not necessarily going to be a day 1 hit, but the point is you don't have anybody in the building who's played snaps and looked competent at the position. I think this pick probably would be a hit long run. I think Brian Flores can find a way to make this guy work. I like the pick.
Yeah, once again, a guy coming from a smaller school. It's the biggest need on the team. I mean, they have Byron Murphy at corner, and who else do they really have?
I don't even think they have Byron Murphy anymore.
Maybe not. He tracks on the physicals. I mean, he's not the most athletic guy in the class by any means, but he's a bigger guy, lengthy, twitchy. I like the pick. I think that there's all 3 of the top corners can be very solid and productive in this league, so I like it.
For sure.
Moving on here to pick 25, the Houston Texans are on the clock, and probably a pretty obvious one here. I don't think they have anywhere else but to go but O-line. And at this point, I think you got to go with Josh Simmons out of Ohio State.
Love that pick.
I think a guy like Tyler Booker out of Bama is also on the board for them, and the Zabel guy as well. They just need talent. They need somebody who can start and be productive and hold their guy in front of them. Stroud was under constant duress last year. You lost Diggs this offseason. You're not going to have Tank Dell next year. Some people think maybe they should draft a receiver, and there is still a good one on the board in Luther Burden, but it's such a glaring need. This is probably the worst O-line, at least currently constructed, that we've seen in the last couple of years. So
I would totally agree, and I think C.J. Stroud is definitely capable of being a top 8 to top 5 quarterback in the NFL, but it's going to take him not getting hit 12 times a game. That's going to take a guy like Josh Simmons. For sure. I love that pick. Moving on to pick 26, we're at the LA Rams.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to address corner in this year's draft. I don't think there's a guy that you could justify a day one pick on. With that in mind, their next biggest need is tight end. You need blocking help for Stafford, sure. You need blocking help for Cam Akers, not Cam Akers, he's not with them anymore, but Kyron Williams and Blake Corum. And you also need another receiving target. The truth is, yeah, you got Devontae Adams. Yeah, you lost Cooper Kupp. In any case, you're just getting older at receiver. Puka Nacua says he wants to play maybe 10 years in this league. You need a long-term guy who's just going to be a Rams guy, culture setter. And you hit on some defensive picks last year. You could double down, but the truth is your guys are just going to have to get older. They're just going to have to develop and learn how to kind of carry on their own. I love Colston Loveland from Michigan. Yes. I think he's the absolute perfect pick for the Rams. I had him going in the offseason video. I think it'll stick.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. I mean, at this point in the draft, I mean, we're getting towards the end here, and I think Colston Loveland probably should have been gone sooner. Like, he's a great talent. I'm going to keep raving about it every time we take a Michigan player. Comes from a winning culture. He's going into a winning culture in LA. I love for them to have a great offense next year, top 10, top 8, whatever it may be. And adding another target for him with Tyler Higbee starting to get up there in age and having his injury concerns. I love it. I think there are a couple other positions you could have went here. Like you said, corner. There really isn't one to take at this point with the top guys being off the board. So, love it.
For sure.
27, we've got the Baltimore Ravens on the clock. And I think we're going to go edge here and take James Pierce Jr. Also another guy you could probably argue maybe should have gone a little sooner. He's a young guy. He's 21 years old. Played in the SEC. Went up against good tackles like Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks. So I think he'll be a very solid addition to the Ravens. I think that he'll start immediately and help what is an older defensive front seven for Baltimore.
This is a team that lost a lot of defensive talent just before last season. You still managed to perform last season, but it was just on the backs of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. I'd love to pick up a weapon in this year's draft too, ideally a receiver, but I don't think you can justify a day one pick on it. I think that defense is just too weak. And personally, I just don't think that's the Harbaugh way. I mean, they just extended Harbaugh for 3 more years. They love the culture. They love the tone that he sets. And, like I was talking about with the Chargers pick, I feel like they believe in balance on both sides of the ball. I think that warrants a defensive pick. If you're really concerned about having a top 10 offense and defense, you need to address that defense in this year's draft.
Right. And how many times are they going to take a receiver early on just for him to be a gadget guy and not, be a bona fide weapon for Lamar?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Lamar almost ran the spread better than Josh Allen did last year. People didn't talk about it. It was just every other game he'd pick a new guy, whether it's Mark Andrews for the 1 or 2 games he popped off last year, Isaiah Likely, Zay Flowers. And now they have DeAndre Hopkins in the building. Very old DeAndre Hopkins, but still, I think Lamar's going to find a way to get him a couple 100-yard games this year. That's all they really need from him. He's not getting paid crazy money, so I love this pick for Baltimore. Moving on to Detroit. Once again, a team that could use defensive help. I feel like this offseason they did make strides. Kind of mostly on the defensive side of the ball. On offense. I mean, I wouldn't say their offensive line necessarily got worse, just got older. Their backfield is still going to be elite. Jared Goff is still going to be Jared Goff. And I would also love a receiver in this year's draft, but personally, I think it's got to be defense. I feel like he's one of the highest touted defensive players in this draft. I feel like the fact that he's falling to 28 just has more to do with positional need, and truthfully, somebody's going to trade up for this guy. I think Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss is going to be a smash hit for the Detroit Lions. They need defensive help. I think they could find it if they find a way to draft this kid.
I love it, man. I think TB's heart's going to be broken when you leave Kenneth Grant out of Michigan on the board, but I think either of them would be solid starters in this league, so I agree with you.
For sure. I mean, I believe that they'd love to get a Michigan guy in the building as well. That said, you can't pass up on a prospect like Nolan. He's just been incredible in the pass rush and in the rush defense. And when you find a guy, one of those unicorns, somebody who can play the same game 2 different ways, I think you just can't pass up on it. Nolan's incredible. Maybe a generational prospect, truth be told. This is not Mozzie Smith out of Michigan 3 years ago for the Dallas Cowboys. This is Walter Nolan.
Right. I'm really torn here because I think Washington is in a similar boat to Cincinnati, where, except Washington actually had success last year in the win column. As you know, I fell in love with this team last year. Jane Daniels is amazing, and as much it's taken everything in me not to grab Luther Burden with him sitting on the board, but I know they need defensive help, so I think it's more likely they go defense here and take Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. He's just the best prospect on the board. Nick Scourton out of Texas A&M is also there, who I like, but he had a down year last year, cutting his sack totals in half from his 2023, promising output. So I think Kenneth Grant's the right pick. Once again, Michigan culture. Going to bring some winning into the Washington defensive locker room, so love it.
I would agree, and I don't necessarily think this is a Dan Quinn pick. Dan Quinn is all about the skill positions. That said, Kenneth Grant has been incredible, does come from a winning culture. You're talking about, he's not quite that top defensive tackle in this year's draft, but he's maybe every bit as capable of being a league starter, especially in year one. Michigan culture is Michigan culture. You won a national champion. Not even from he's another year aged from a national championship to come into your building and say, yeah, I'm going to take you from the NFC championship to the Super Bowl. And I think that's exactly what Washington's looking for in this year's draft. Moving on to the Buffalo Bills. This is a team that has made important re-signings on the defense, but mostly cheap ones because they're spending a lot of money, and I don't really know on what, but they were very poor in cap space this year. So James Cook may be on the way out. We can't take it back. It's just not worth it. Our receivers suck. We spent a first rounder last year on Keon Coleman. We have Khalil Shakir, who has the lowest drop rate in the league and is an elite receiver 1 and would be a receiver 1 everywhere. No, he's not. Luther Burden's on the board, and I'm really tempted to take him here, but that defense is so mid, talent-wise. And they performed mostly like it, like a decent run defense, terrible pass defense. I think you need to get a pass rusher in this league. In this year's draft, and I don't think Joey Bosa is going to be capable of elevating your defense the way you hope he is. That's kind of just like a prayer signing to me, throwing $14 million to a guy and him maybe being as good as his brother. That's just not going to happen.
I agree.
So, I know we have Shamar Stewart on the board.
Nick Scourton,
Mikael Williams. I personally think Scourton is the best out of those 3 left on the board. I'm going to take him for the Bills. I feel like he has the capability of filling that role when Bosa's gone and probably exceeding his production.
Yeah, they just signed their draft pick from Miami a couple years back. What was his name? To like a 4-year massive deal. It was Jalen Phillips, and then he was the other one.
Exactly who you're talking about.
His name just slipped my mind.
He got like $20 million a year plus.
Yeah, he got like a 4-year, $84 million deal. Man, this is gonna bother me.
I made the Bills video the other day, bro.
Greg Rousseau. Dude. What a terrible signing, if we're being honest, man. He's a rotational pass rusher at best, similar role to what Von Miller was last year, and just did not have anywhere near enough production to warrant that kind of money, that kind of a long-term deal. However, you gave him the money. Like you said, Joey Bosa maybe is a plug-and-play guy. Maybe he sticks, maybe he doesn't. And doubling down at the edge spot and solidifying, at the bare minimum, a solid pass rush would be a great move.
For sure.
Moving on to my final pick here with the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to go in a direction that I don't think you're expecting me to go in. So, Gray Zabel is still on the board. Tyler Booker out of Bama is also still on the board at O-line. They lost Joe Thuney and I believe one other cat this offseason. No, they re-signed Trey Smith. That's what it was.
They got him on a tag.
That's right.
So no guarantee that he's sticking around.
True. I don't think they go O-line. Their top 2 receivers are facing legal issues.
Both of them. One of them was a first-round pick last year that might be in the trash can.
Right. And Rashee Rice, when he was on the field, great player, really, took a stride last year. However, Mahomes obliterated his knee. Who knows if he's going to look anywhere similar to what he did last year. And that's not even taking into account his legal issues. Luther Burden's sitting on the board, and I've seen Jamar Chase comparisons with him. Wizard with the ball in his hands. Not amazing against press man coverage. They didn't ask Xavier Worthy or Rashee Rice to do that. Give me Luther Burden. It just seems like somebody of importance is going to fall to the Chiefs, and they're going to get their hands on a really productive guy. And
it just tends to happen.
It does. And in this mock, it's going to be Luther Burden. I love the pick.
Yeah, I don't dislike that pick at all. It honestly kind of slipped my mind the fact that they might not have either of their receiver 1 and 2s in this year's, come this season.
I mean, they'll lose Kelsey next year as well.
They're going to lose Kelsey after this year, more than likely to retirement. I don't think they'll have an option to keep him. And, they kept Hollywood Brown on a 1-year deal, lost DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think that's going to be enough. And the truth is, you could hope and pray that Mahomes kind of returns to that MVP caliber player, 40 touchdowns with no noteworthy receivers. But I just don't think that's realistic. This defense is still really solid. Mahomes, just 2 years ago, won a Super Bowl with one of the worst offensive lines in the league. He didn't do it last year, but, the only thing that stopped him was Philly. If it were anybody but Philly, are we really sure that Mahomes wouldn't have won that Super Bowl? Because I think if Washington's in that bowl, it's a totally different story.
You might be right.
And with that in mind, if you're hoping to kind of return to glory and get one last shot with Kelsey, I don't hate this pick at all. I think it's really solid.
100%.
Moving on to Philly, the last pick in this year's first round. Their offense is so perfect. It upsets me so bad. And really the only thing that could bring it down is the fact that Kellen Moore's not there. But even then, I think I could draw great plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. Defensively, they were so great last year. They lost a lot of talent. They brought in a lot of Georgia players. Let's draft another Georgia player. We're going to take Mikael Williams out of Georgia.
It's really not a bad pick if you think about it.
It's not a bad pick at all. I think they're looking for long-term answers on defense because the truth is, although they had great picks in the secondary last year, that's really all they addressed in the draft. And they just absolutely knocked it out of the park and got the best 2 corners from last year's draft. But you're looking to build on all levels of the defense because your offense is so perfect and extended for 4 or 5 years. This is a guy who more than likely in a Vic Fangio system is going to thrive 4 years. And I would just love to see him start as a rotational guy and build up and eventually, be an absolute killer on the defense. I would hate to see it as a Dallas fan, but I would love to see it for Philly. I feel like it's a great pick.
Yes. He's one of those prospects where, he's kind of on the border between later first round, maybe early second round. I'm not going to even try to doubt Philly's front office. The Georgia method works. Why fix it if it ain't broke? He may not be an immediate contributor, but similarly to Milton Williams, 2 guys with the name M. Williams, and he's going to fill a spot. That's kind of ironic, but I don't know. I mean, he doesn't need to play 80-90% of the snaps. you do exactly what Milton Williams did last year with just as much talent, if not more. I mean, are we seeing back-to-back Super Bowl champs? Who knows?
And then, I mean, think about the young core that you have on this defense between Coop and Q in the secondary. And then you've got Jalen Carter on the defensive line, along with Mikael Williams.
And Kobe Dean as well.
And Kobe Dean. And this defense looks incredible and young for years to come. And the offense is just now starting to get mature, with Devontae Smith finally starting to exercise those first few years of his franchise deal. A.J. Brown on a franchise deal. Saquon Barkley on a franchise deal. Jalen Hurts on a franchise deal. So this defense is entirely young, which is kind of what you want because defensive players expire around that 30, 31-year-old mark.
100%, yeah. Well, this has been our mock draft for 2025. We appreciate you guys for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.